had this huge garden, and I walked out, and it was completely dead. And I looked at the garden, and I looked at those two plants, and I was like, those plants, this garden, it's me.
I've been, not necessarily warned, but, hesitant oftentimes to talk about my way of healing where I'm at now. But at the same time, I said, you know what, Brandon, it is you, and it is your story. And if you don't, then there is some shame around there, and others will judge me. Others will, but that's not about me. I don't want to live in fear.
Welcome to Recover the Valley podcast by Sanctuary Recovery Centers. The voices are yours, the stories are yours. Through shared experience, shared hope, and community, we focus on true healing from addiction. True stories, true community, truly you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our new episode of Sanctuary Radio. We would like to introduce Brandon Lee to our podcast today, our radio station, and Brandon's a good friend of mine. We've had some quick friendships. Our friendship has been very quick over the last couple of years, and I'm very excited to have you on. I've been wanting for you to come on and share with us about yourself and just what you do, and just for people to get to know a different side of you. So
well, we connected right off the bat. I think that there's just an energy and a spiritual connectedness that you just have with some people. And we kind of, when we first met, and we really were, I do deep dive conversations with people. I'm not like a surface level kind of person. And that's so people say, God, you're such an extrovert. And I'm like, no, really, I'm an introvert extrovert. And so I keep my circle small. And when I'm at like a dinner party, whatever, like I end up having a deep conversation with like one person that you really kind of connect with. I don't do well at surface level conversations. So the deeper I go with somebody, it's just the more in tune and the connectedness is there.
And I definitely felt that from the first minute that we met. So it's wonderful. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Give me a little bit of your history and kind of what you've been through and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So, the short end of it, right? It's because it could be a book, and I wrote a book about it. But, the short end of it is that, the early formative years of my life, there was just a lot of child abuse and neglect. There was a lot of childhood trauma, and just even the trauma of not feeling the closeness and the connectedness with my own mother, the nurturing of my own mother. And that in and of itself is trauma. And the way that hit my body was pretty intense and hard. There was a lot of child sex abuse from the ages of 7 to 10 with 3 different men in my life. It was my youth soccer coach, my next door neighbor, and my piano teacher. And then in addition to that, right, there was also just a lot of physical abuse and neglect within my own home. But I always tell people, I was born into privilege, and I own that, and I speak about that. I was born in Newport Beach, California. I grew up right on the water. I never had to worry about food on the table or roof over my head. I went to some of the best Catholic schools. And so, I share that because I want people to know that despite all the privilege I was born into, I became a cocaine addict at 15, and I became a sex worker at 15. Would literally leave Catholic school, go drive home through Laguna Beach at 16 years old and prostitute myself. And again, I didn't need a food on the table. I didn't need a roof over my head. It's just the way I began acting out. And, I got into NYU, super overachiever, as a way to kind of, overcome a lot of those things. The hurt, survived 9/11 in New York City. It was a pretty traumatic day when I was there in New York City, saw a lot of things people should never witness or experience. And then, was just a drug user, super high functioning. And I share about that all the time. It ended in hospital stays, being a coma on life support, and being rescued and saved and multiple times. And then eventually made it to AA, did the whole AA thing for 11 years, about 5 meetings a week, which is a long time. And then I experienced, I never say suffer, and then I experienced that first relapse in 2020. And that's why I tell people time doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. Going to meetings alone does not heal you. It does not rewire your brain, right? AA will give you a foundation to live a good life. It will not heal you. So I have my story to back that up, because if it did, 11 years, 5 meetings a week, it wouldn't have ended in a relapse. And I worked that program. So I got triggered in 2020. trauma, since I never spent any time healing myself from that trauma. I used to be the guy that said, oh, play the tape forward. You hear that a lot in meetings. Play the tape forward. Well, I'm here to tell you there is no tape. It's a disc track, and you are skipping to the next track. Your brain gets hijacked. And I went into fight or flight, experienced that relapse. And it was then in 2020 that I decided to really sit there and go, what else do I need to do that I haven't done? Because someone in the rooms of AA told me that I needed to hand over my 11 sobriety chips, years, and start over at 24 hours. That in and of itself right there is shame. Yeah. That is the definition of shame. Give me what you've earned, go in front of a room full of strangers, stand up there, collect a white chip, and start that journey again. I'm here to
But at 11 years, it's not a room full of strangers.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's just...
It's not.
It's just like I sit there and go, they're like, oh, it's about accountability. Well, I can be accountable to my therapist. Like I can be accountable to other people. Yeah. But just the definition of like the thought though, where it took me at that moment was I can't do that journey again. I cannot do those 11 years over again. Are you kidding me? And so that actually sent me so far into shame and darkness. And that led me to suicidal ideation in January 2021. And my therapist just knew something was off and confronted me about it. And she said, Brandon, there's only so much I can do with your frontal lobe. She goes, I can only go so far. She goes, you have to start working with Toby. And Toby's a shaman who worked then at her time in a therapist practice. And so through deep breath work, I began doing the reprocessing, and it would take me back to moments of my childhood. Things that I can get high enough after 10 minutes of breath work, and get past the frontal lobe to the amygdala. And I would start seeing things from my childhood, Ulonda, that my frontal lobe consciously, I did not remember. I mean, things like being tied up to bedposts with neckties as a form of discipline, and in a manic fit of rage with my mom, like chucking a knife at my head as a form of discipline. And, going back and healing that inner child that lives within all of us. And that's what eventually led me to what I'm doing now. I started having visions of artwork in April of 2021. And I was telling Toby, I'll call him a therapist. I told Toby, because he's just like, tell people I'm your therapist.
Yeah,
and then they won't give you.
It's easier to explain.
You won't get these weird looks when you tell people you're working with a shaman. So Toby, the therapist, goes, hey, have you ever been an artist? And I'm like, yo, man, no, I haven't. And he goes, I'm going to tell you what's happening. It's the same reoccurring dream, and it was me at the age of 10 throwing paint at myself. And he goes, okay, dude, I'm going to tell you what's happening. You're becoming so unfrozen from your childhood that your inner child's just coming out to play. So why don't you head to the art store, pick up some canvas and paints, and go create? And so I did, and I'm self-taught, so I just turned my guest room into an art room, started painting. And then I had that vision in the summer of 2021. I woke up and 3 words were written on my nightstand on a paper towel: studio, gallery, and school. Made no sense to me. And so I worked with him on that. I said, what was this? What was my subconscious telling me in my sleep, with these words? And he goes, Brandon, just be open to the download from spirit. And I literally heard a voice as best as I can describe that. And it just told me, you're not living your life's purpose. What you're doing right now, being in the news, and you need to open up an art healing studio for trauma survivors like yourself, Brandon, to give them the gift of art in the way I've given you art to heal from your trauma. A month later, I quit my job, 22 years of being in the news, and November 1st of 2021, opened up Art of Our Soul with 2 treatment centers at the time that had committed to me, just 2. But I didn't care. Yeah. I know what I heard. I know what I heard. Yeah. And I know what my purpose was. And then the rest is kind of history where I'm at, with where I'm at today. So my therapist goes, Brandon, do you love the life you have today? God, are you kidding me? I love this life I have today. He says, good. Then you must give thanks to the relapse you experienced in 2020, Brandon. Had you not had that experience, you would not have done the healing work necessary to give you the life you've created today. This is true. You love your life today. I say, yes, I love this life today. He goes, this will be challenging. He goes, you need to give thanks to the people who hurt you when you were a child, Brandon. Had you not had that experience, you would not have this life you have today in which you say you love. This is true. Trauma for each and every one of us will happen in our lives. Ulonda, it is an opportunity. Trauma is an opportunity for each and every one of us if we allow it to serve us and to teach us, so we can heal from it, grow from it, and then Do what you and I are doing now.
Right.
Help others through their dark times and their trauma to give them light to see that you too can have this. And that, to me, is what life's God's purpose is for me.
I like that. You know, and I just being with the experience of working with him as well. I mean, we see the same therapist. And to be able to work with him and delve deeper, you know, beyond what people think that we should know about ourselves.
Beyond talk therapy.
Well, right.
Really.
Beyond just the surface.
Correct.
You know, delving deep and being able to really dig into, you know, those experiences that happened that were repressed. You know, I myself, you know, have had some visions of myself as a child and being locked in a room for hours and hours and not knowing who was on the other side of the door and just working through all those things that were brought up from those visions, you know, and you know, me and you have experienced a lot of the same type of trauma. Yeah. I, of course, wasn't brought up in privilege. I was, you know, born on the reservation and grew up very poor and, you know, had to worry about food and water and lights and things like that being on the reservation and not growing up with my mom for the first 5 years of my life.
That's the trauma.
Right. That's all the trauma. And those are the 0 to 5 experiences, the childhood development, the things that you're supposed to feel throughout those years in your life. And not being able to process those because you don't have the knowledge.
Correct.
Right. And so you carry those traumas with you and they turn into other things. You know, you prostituted and you know, sold your body and did those things. I didn't sell my body. I gave my body away. You know, I went through a lot of abuse physically, sexually, mentally, all up until I was probably about 23 years old, you know, and I also found the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous through very many trials and tribulations, jail, prison. But I actually stepped into my first room of Alcoholics Anonymous when I was about 13. Yeah, very young, was not ready for that at all. I went to drug treatment at a young age. I think I was like 14 or 15. And, you know, just never really being able to connect to my family. So I completely understand what you're saying about, you know, the trauma and just not being able to deal with any of it, but not given the tools. The people around me weren't set up for that. You know, my mom went to boarding school. My grandparents were very poor, grew up on the reservation, but not, I want to say poor, like, as in like they didn't have financial, you know, not a lot of finances, right? But they were rich. My grandparents were rich in spirit. Like I really attest to everything that I am spiritually today and like my connection to people and the goodness in my heart is from them.
Right.
You know, and so I think that is a lot of the reason why we connected, you know, is we have that same kind of history and
trauma can be trauma.
We have a trauma
bond. I was just like, but we gotta preface that trauma bonded in a healthy way because we're both on our healing journeys from that trauma.
Right.
Oh boy, yeah, we see a lot of trauma bonding happen within the rooms, you know, like within places, you know, treatment centers and just in the whole recovery space. There's a lot of trauma bonding out there, but really in a healthy way. And you know, it's fascinating because my grandmother is the one place that I learned compassion and love.
Yes.
Had I, you know, like, so I talk about her all the time as far as like, she was the one I always felt safe with. She was the always one, and I get chills thinking of her. She's probably here right now, is that she's the one who made me feel safe and loved. And she was the one that really showed me and allowed me to feel what love is supposed to feel like. And so I give, you know, so much credence, and just my heart is just so grateful for that, that I can still hold on to, because I don't have a relationship with my family, but it's really important when I speak about this now, Ulonda, that I also tell people I don't resent them. I love my parents, and I've told them this recently. I saw my parents for the first time in 8 years in July. It had been 8 years since I had actually seen them. And I was up in Utah, and I looked at them and I said, I want you both to know that I love you. I love you both unconditionally, and I will always love you. we may never have a relationship in this lifetime, but please know, when you do eventually go to our graves and cross over, please go knowing that your son loves you. I know my parents did the best they could. I know my parents to this day love me, and I know they love me unconditionally, Ulonda. They love me in the only way they know how to love me, and unfortunately, that love hurts.
Yeah, you can't give what you don't have.
It's correct,
Yeah.
and it's generational trauma.
Yeah.
Our parents, your mom, right? They suffered immense trauma as children themselves. That generation was never given a chance. Remember, vulnerability was looked at as a weakness and not a strength, right? So how could they heal, right? And so I tell that to people because I'm not unique in this. You're not unique in that. All those people who suffer from substance use disorder, guess what? They all have that experience too. But being able to understand and be trauma informed allows you to let that resentment go, because that meeting when I saw them was not about them. That was about me.
Yeah. And it was also about cracking yourself open to spirit.
Yes. Hugely.
And I think that's what people get lost in, like forgiveness. Like forgiveness isn't about the other person.
Placating them and making them happy. It's not.
Yeah, forgiveness is about us and our relationship to spirit and like what we want to bring to the world and how we want to heal within ourselves. It has nothing to do with anything outside of that and like what we can do better.
But I couldn't have had that meeting had I not had the nearly 3 years of working with Toby, my therapist, because I had to heal all parts of me in order for me to have that meeting with them, to truly and genuinely say, no, I love you and I understand the pain that you guys experience as children, and I just want you to know. Because had I not done that healing, it would have turned into, I needed this from you, and you did this to me as a child. You weren't there. Blaming. And that puts me right back in victim mode. So we go back. So I tell people as well, what happened to you as a child, it is not your fault. What happened to me as a child is not my fault. However, it is absolutely my responsibility, and my responsibility only. It's not my parents' responsibility to heal myself of that trauma. Because if we in this moment of our journeys don't heal from whatever cuts have made us bleed, I promise you, you will bleed on others who have never hurt you. And I mean your kids, I mean your partners, your husbands, and your wives. Anyone. You won't do it intentionally either. It will be unintentionally because of your open wounds.
Well, we just don't know how to be.
Correct?
Yeah, we don't know how to be. All we know how to do is survive and react. We don't know how to be in those moments and like
constantly in that fight or flight mode. Constantly.
And we don't even understand ourselves and why we're going through all of this, you know, and that's the beauty of therapy, right? And the type of therapy that we do, or just any therapy at all that cracks you open. And I've always liked that term because that's exactly what it is.
It is.
It's cracking you open, cracking the shell and letting what's inside out, you know.
Because trauma, unhealed trauma, we build this hard outer structure of ourselves because we don't want to be hurt. We make it like this impenetrable wall. So cracking that open, I mean, I'm telling you, some of the guys we deal with, either from Crossroads or in reentry, these are they're hardened dudes.
Yeah.
But man, you can get them in the right space. Now, some people aren't going to just sit down with a therapist and share their feelings, right? So we have to find other healing modalities to open up that frontal lobe, crack them open, and boy, you see their inner child come out, and they'll start tearing up in our art studio and sharing with me things that they haven't shared openly with another therapist, right? Yeah. And so, you know, not everyone learns the same way. Not everyone heals the same way. It's incumbent upon us, right? In Sanctuary, where you have so many people coming here to Sanctuary to heal, to begin that healing journey, it's up to us to offer different modalities, because what works for you is not going to work for person over there, you know, and what works for them isn't necessarily going to work for that person.
So on a day-to-day, how do you start your day? How do you, begin your day and go through the day? Like, what is your routine per se, or
It's changed. It's changed. You know, when I used to do the evening news, I would sleep in till 11 o'clock in the morning the next day because I'd get home from work at midnight. I'd be wired up until like 2 a.m. And things have really changed for me. I'm very, very structured. I am so structured without my day. And I wake up and I immediately I'll have like a bite to eat, but I go and I actually train at the gym with my trainer. And I made that commitment to myself because I know if I don't have a trainer to hold me accountable, I will skip. I will allow myself to say, gosh, I just need to sleep in today. I just need to sleep in today. I'll hit the gym at the end of the day. Well, also, I know at the end of the day, after pouring my heart and soul into every patient, I tell people, man, I'm physically exhausted at the end of the day. I'm not mentally exhausted. I'm physically. My cup is full. Man, I'm drained. So I know that won't happen. I won't have enough energy at the end of the day to go to the gym. So I hired a trainer. I'm privileged enough that I'm grateful that I can. So if you can't, what I will say is find a workout partner. It's essentially what my guy is, a workout partner. And I make that commitment. I start there and then I go to work. I make sure that I had to hire somebody in recovery who just started his own meal prep service and I hired him to do meal prepping for me because if I don't, I won't eat. I will get so lost and so busy in my day, I will skip eating. Mm-hmm. And so I make sure I have 3 meals a day at work so that I'm always eating and staying, nourished and things like that. And then I've committed. I do my healing sessions once a week, with my therapist, Toby. We sit there and we do that. So that is one thing that's hugely important to me is to do those 2-hour sessions of breath work and energy clearings and all those things to keep me right.
Yeah. I do none of those things. I get up in the morning. I usually wake up from a 6-year-old jumping in my bed, telling me it's time to get up. And then I begrudgingly get out of bed and have coffee. But one thing that I do is I get up in the morning and I read meditations. Even though she's up and, watching TV or whatnot, I still get up at about 5:30 in the morning, and I read I think it's like 6 different meditations. I don't open any emails. I don't, sometimes I'll respond to text messages and things like that, but usually I try not to, and I just have that quiet time within myself, and I have done it so often that she doesn't bother me. Like she knows I get up, I'm going to go to the restroom, I'm going to drink some water, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read. And then I do have to make sure, that I eat timely. But one thing that I did re-enter back into my life is the sessions with the therapist.
Yeah.
I had gone almost a whole year and
you got busy.
I did. I got too busy for myself.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
I chose to be too busy. And I also chose to sit in grief.
Yeah.
For those that know me, both my parents passed away within a 1.5 year period. And it was very, very difficult for me. We talked about our parents. Yeah. I had a rough time with my dad. My mom was very, she had a wall up. And it was mostly to, it's because of the experiences that she had in her life, and I had to work through that forgiveness and for that understanding as well. Because she just gave me what she could.
Yeah.
And so I did a little bit of the opposite. So I entrenched myself into the life with my parents for my children. I have 3 children, and I wanted them to have the same experience that I had with my grandparents. Right. And I didn't want to be the reason why they didn't. And so they didn't have the same experience. My daughter did with my dad. But, so I chose to sit in that grief. And the reason being is I needed to know what it was like to work through that pain. I needed to know and accept that I had such strong love and care for my parents, regardless of what happened. I needed to feel it. Yeah. And I sat in it. And then one day I walked out into the backyard and I looked at my garden. So I'm an avid gardener. I love gardening.
Which is hugely therapeutic when you're using your hands and your hands are in the soil, just like art, just like pottery.
Yeah.
It's that connectivity.
I had this huge garden and I walked out and it was completely dead. Except for I had 2 plants. I had a green chili and a jalapeno plant. And I walked out and I looked at the garden and I looked at those 2 plants and I was like, those plants, this garden, it's me. Like it was like an epiphany that I had. It was like a direct reflection of myself. And I was like, I can't have this. Like I can't have that.
Like they were you
they
and
were
everything
me.
dead was you sitting in that grief.
That moment was those 2 plants. I was those 2 plants. Like they suffered the hardships of 2 summers, not getting watered, not getting nurtured, not getting talked to, nothing. And I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
I can't do this to myself. And so I made some pledges to myself. Like in that moment, I was going to eat better. I was going to reach out. I was going to talk to people. And then I was going to call Toby.
Yeah.
And so I did. And, he asked me, why I was choosing to come back. And I said, because now I need to get back to myself.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I need to get back to myself, but not just like caring for myself. I needed to be myself again because I'm not a sad person.
No.
I'm not a person who's depressed. I love to laugh and be with my friends and be with my family and my children and go out and I wasn't doing anything. I love to cook. I love to bake. I just like to be filled with joy. And I was none of that for 2 years, So I was like, okay, so how do I get back to that? And so that was a really long roundabout of what I do during the day.
No, it is. It's beautiful. But to even add on to add on to that, because you were just saying you're essentially saying yes to you.
Yeah.
So, and I really don't speak to. I really haven't spoken much about this, but I have another spiritual healer and guide here in Scottsdale, and I did a journey several weeks ago. And did the prep work with set intention and to really go deep inward. And one of the things, the visions that came during that was I was being ripped apart and I was being pulled in all these different directions. And it was people pulling me, Brandon, I need you to speak here. Brandon, I need you to be over here. Brandon, I need you to donate here. Brandon, I need you over here. And literally in this visions that I was seeing throughout this 6-hour journey was I was being ripped apart and I was just crying.
Yeah.
And finally I saw little B, my inner child, and he was there and he was 10 and he was crying. And he goes, why are you saying yes to everybody else
But yourself?
He goes, he said, what about me? How come you don't say yes to me? And I sat there with this guide to help me integrate and process what I'm seeing and feeling. And I'm telling her, and I made him a promise in this journey. I said, I am so sorry. I have forgotten you again, and I've abandoned you again because life is so busy.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be everything to everyone. And I made him that promise, and I spoke to him, and I said, little B, I promise you, I will start saying no to them, which means I'm saying yes to me, right? And so, I can tell people I went on a journey. See, he's not sober, right? He went on a journey. He did a psilocybin, right?
Right.
He's not sober. Well, that's okay. I don't tell people I'm sober. I'm not sober, right? I've healed.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about.
Because I want to be able to have
What
these
that
open
means to you.
conversations, and I think that's one thing is that, it's if we don't have it, then that means we're still shrouded in shame about it, right? And I'm not saying what I do is for everybody. Please, before I share what I'm about to share, I need everybody who's listening to know that what I do with my life and my program for healing on my spiritual journey and me having this human experience is not for everyone.
Right.
So don't interpret it that, oh, well, Brandon's doing this, so I'm going to go do this.
We're all going to go.
Yeah. This is not.
Yeah.
And, so I really do preface this now. Like, what I'm doing with my life does not mean you need to be doing it with yours. But at least let's have a conversation to open up our minds. Because if we're going to be real here, real, you can't say that even Alcoholics Anonymous is a fully successful program.
Right.
Okay? 100%, I mean, it's less than 50% of the people find it to be successful. So for those who do, please, by the love of God, continue to do what works for you. Please, it's working for you, do it. But you can't say it works for everybody because it doesn't.
No.
And so there's a large swath of people out there that we need to still reach out to and not close our doors just because they're not going to do it our certain way. And so it led me on this path where I did something for 11 years, 5 meetings a week. Okay. And then I experienced that relapse. Okay, well, I needed to try something else. And it wasn't to try harder, because I can't tell you how many times I did the step work over and over. I probably did 8 4 steps. I've read through the book, and so I did it. So I was like, I'm going to try something new. And that's when I started meeting Toby, and for 2.5 years, just straight breath work. And then it was time. And then it was time for me to delve deeper in the opportunity. This spiritual healer that I met with, it was the right opportunity at the right time, and I've done 2. And I have grown and healed so much in those 2 sessions. It has been absolutely incredible. And I'm a fully believer of this, that addiction is a spectrum, just like autism is a spectrum. Bill W., who authored the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, says in the book, some are sicker than others. Bill W. knew in the 1930s that there was a spectrum to alcoholism and addiction. He knew that. Otherwise, he wouldn't have written, some are sicker than others. So if you're a 10 out of 10, what works in the program that is needed for that person doesn't need to necessarily be applied to a person who's a 5 out of 10, right? And so I'm of the belief that you are not born this way. You're not born an addict. No, it is the childhood experience, the childhood trauma that creates the addiction behaviors, right? If we don't have that deep-seated connection of nurturing and love with our parents, what does alcohol and drugs do? It gives us this warm sense of this cozy blanket, allowing that inner child in that moment of, when we're high or when we're drunk, to feel that warmth, right? To feel that. That's what it gives us, because that's what our bodies need and crave as well, right? And so if you're of the belief that childhood trauma is the gateway to addiction, there you go. That's what we should be focusing on. How do we go back and reprocess to heal those childlike parts? Because if you do, you won't have the same urge and craving to numb out, because you've reprocessed, you've rewired, and you've gone back to heal that inner child. Those cravings won't exist. And I can say that because I speak that from my experience. So I don't want people to think, I don't want to do this sobriety thing because that's going to be me it's like a life sentence. That's going to be me for the rest of my life. And my thing is, for some people, they may choose sobriety for the rest of their lives. That is a choice that they will make. But I will tell other people, that doesn't have to be you. That doesn't have to be you either. But at least try healing the trauma.
Yeah.
Like if you don't want to do the AA and the hardcore, that's okay. How about we go back and work with a spiritual healer and really go back and do the reprocessing work with different therapies? I promise you go back and heal that inner child, whether it's through EMDR and the reprocessing work. You go back and you do those things. I would suffice to say, those urgings and those cravings will go away and diminish. Because look how many people you can go to an AA room. How many times are you seeing people collect white chips who've been in the program for years and years and years and years? Right. They get a certain amount of time and then they relapse. They get a certain amount of time and they relapse. And I'll ask you, have you rewired your brain? Have you done the reprocessing work? And they'll say no. And I said, well, you're going to continue to have this pattern, this hold pattern for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a lot of different modalities too in therapy and in treatment that work for others. Like I myself, I have done psychedelics and, you know, psilocybin and things like that. And in
culturally too.
And culturally,
right.
Culturally, you know, mescaline. And,
mescaline,
you know,
especially. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's culturally. So I have a different viewpoint of like what those medicines mean. And what they do in your life.
And thank you, right, for calling them medicines.
Well, because
that's what they are. They're plant allies. Yeah,
you
they're
know?
medicines.
Yeah, it's medicine, and that's the way I grew up to think about it. You don't abuse the medicine.
Correct.
You don't
Correct.
take it out of context. And
Correct.
so, you know, we didn't. We did it in specific traditional settings and cultural, you know, meetings and in song and in spirit and with family, and you know, we did those things together to heal, and as an adult, you know, who has been in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous and all the, you know, all the rooms, I have learned, you know, that I do have, you know, the human condition of using drugs and alcohol to get outside of myself and to, you know, not be present in the pain and the hurt that I feel. And what I've learned about myself over the last, you know, 14 years, I'll have, you know, I still use time, you know, the last 14 years of my recovery.
I think we got sober. We chose to get sober around the same time because I would be, if I did count time, I would have 14 years this February, coming up February.
Yeah. So mine's in October. But when I was going through all that grief and stuff that I spoke on earlier, not one time did I think about picking up drugs and alcohol. You know, so you're right to speak to, you know, if you do the work and you do those things, that the cravings go away. Yeah. And the thing for me though is that I don't want to pick up drugs and alcohol at all.
Right.
At all. I know what it does in my life. I know what it can do because I've been through that experience.
I choose not to do meth for sure. Like
sure.
I didn't heal, and let's say I didn't heal myself so I can go recreationally use. I healed myself so that I won't be triggered.
Right.
Like we can have all the tools we want. Like and I live my life by the AA principles. Right. So I'm always so grateful for the foundation and the principles that AA provides and gives me. I will always live by those. As a matter of fact, everybody in this world should live by the principles of AA. Full stop. But I tell people, I'm like, your therapist can go into your tool chest, right? When these triggers happen, go into your tool chest. I'm like, man, how nice would it be just to not be triggered?
Right. That would be lovely.
Right.
Lovely.
It takes work, though. Mm-hmm. It does.
Well, I mean, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you shared some of that stuff with us today. Yeah. And, you know, gave me the opportunity to maybe share some of the things that I don't normally get to share with others or choose not to share with others.
Choose.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, choose. And, I've been, not necessarily warned, but, hesitant oftentimes to talk about my way of healing where I'm at now. But at the same time, I said, you know what, Brandon, it is you and it is your story. And if you don't, then there is some shame around there and others will judge me. Mm-hmm. Others will, but that's not about me. It's about them.
Right.
It really is. It has nothing to do with me, and I know how great my life is now. And I love my life now, and I will continue to do the things spiritually that I want to do with my life now. Because if we live in this place of fear, right? I don't want to live in fear.
Or judgment.
I want to have an experience. Mm-hmm. How can I know something unless I have an experience about it, right? And so I could have all these judgments about psilocybins, right? But until I experience it, how will I know? As my therapist told me, Brandon, it'll either be a good experience or it'll be a bad experience. And Brandon, you know too much and you are committed to this work so that if it's a bad experience, you won't do it again. But you won't know unless you have an experience, right? So I don't tell people, like when I share, I don't count time like some do. Yeah. But what I tell people is, listen, I no longer identify as an alcoholic or an addict. I don't want to label myself as such anymore. I've done the work to heal myself from that. But what I do tell people is that I've been on my healing journey from trauma for coming up on 14 years. So that's how I identify.
And and at the end of the day, we're supposed to, for those of us that are healing and on the same journey in recovery, whatever you want to call it, we're supposed to support each other.
Yes.
And I always like the term, we're here to walk each other home.
Yes.
you know, and so if we're not doing that, then what are we doing?
Correct.
You know,
and let's not judge others on what their program looks like, because it doesn't look like mine.
Right.
And think that they're doing it wrong and they're going to mess up. It's just like they're waiting for that other shoe to drop or something. It's like, no,
it's none of my business. It's none of my business what somebody else is doing.
For sure.
The only business that's my business is my business.
Right.
And that's it. Anything else? Oh, besides my kids. Yeah. But anything else is what it is.
And here to support and love and share our experiences with other people, you know? I mean, that's how you and I even got connected with Toby, right? I mean, how you did. I mean, share my experience with you and openly about the experiences that I was having. And you're an extremely spiritual person on your journey. And so we connected over that, you know? Had I not, you know, I mean, that's what we are about, being a community of us, and what I like to say is a community in recovery journey from trauma, and we'll always be there and always help. And I had so many of my dear friends who are still part of the program, and I fully support them and love them. And you know what? They fully support and love me too, right? And so that's how it should always be. Yeah.
And on that note, thank you for coming here today.
Always. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Oh, I can sit here and talk to you for hours.
Hours.
Hours.